What we will do today is look at a quote that is critical in the Islamic understanding of why those who mock Muhammad must be punished, including killed.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked. Those who uphold the law resist them. Welcome to the Voice of Resistance. Here's your host, Randall Terry.
As you know, there are certain Islamic countries that have committed to be partners with us in the war on terrorism. Jordan is one of them. But listen to a quote recently, not too long ago, given by King Abdullah II. This is what he said. Quote, "Insulting Muhammad is a crime that cannot be justified under the pretext of freedom of expression." Close quote. In other words, he is not committed to what we are committed to. He's saying it's a crime. It's a criminal act to insult Muhammad. Now, where does this idea, I beg your pardon, begin? It begins with Muhammad himself. Now, for those of you who missed yesterday's program, I spent a lot of time talking about what's going on in Paris, and I invite you to go to our website, Voice of Resistance, to watch that episode. I'm going to pick up where I left off, give you a little bit of background. Muhammad used to live in Mecca as a younger man, and then he fled Mecca for Medina. When he was in Mecca, he was preaching and writing psalms and poetry, part of which are in the Quran now, about the unity of God, that God is one, and that polytheism, many gods, was a sin. Now, Mecca was a very critical center point in the region for polytheism, and there were many gods that were worshipped there. And so he really got under the skin of the leaders of Mecca. And he had maybe 180, 200 followers after years of preaching. So it was not a huge threat to them, but it was an annoyance. And they decided that they were going to assassinate him. He got word of it and he fled. And it is what is called the Hijra. It is the beginning of the Muslim calendar. So Muhammad and his followers went to Medina, and then when he was in Medina, that is when, allegedly, Allah showed him that he could use force, he could use lethal force in the promotion of Islam and the conversion of his enemies, or just the flat-out killing of his enemies. Well, he had great success in various campaigns. You can read about it in the book that I've told you to read, The Life of Muhammad. But there's a point that is really critical to what we're doing. When he was finally strong enough with his followers to march on Mecca itself, right? People in Mecca were terrified. They thought, oh my goodness, we kicked him out. He's coming here to wreak havoc. He's coming here for revenge. But Muhammad marched in peacefully with an army of 10,000 people, and he circumvented or walked around the Kaaba, the prescribed number of times. I believe it was 7 times. And on his way in, he urged his followers, let's take the city peacefully. But there were 6 people that he said must die. We find them, we kill them. 3 of them, half of those that were sentenced to death by Muhammad, were people who had mocked him in song and in poetry. I want to read you this passage from Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir is one of the most respected histories of Muhammad's life. It is studied by most devout Muslims throughout the world and in America. I've got my own 4-volume set. So the man's name was Abd Allah, who was making songs and poems against Muhammad. Here's what it says. He had 2 female singers, Fartana and a friend, who would sing songs mocking the messenger of God, that's Muhammad, and the Muslims. This is why the messenger of God condemned him and the two singers to death. Who condemned these people to death? Muhammad himself. Why were they condemned to death? Because they sang songs mocking Muhammad, insulting them. He, the enemy of Muhammad, Abd Allah, he was killed while he clutched the hangings of the Kaaba. One of his woman singers was killed while the other one was granted clemency. She fled and was begging for her life, and sometime later Muhammad found out that she was still alive and was asking to be forgiven, and he forgave her. He was clutching the hangings of the Kaaba. He was at the very center of the worship of God or gods that were in Mecca. All right, it'd be like somebody going to the altar of a church, or in the Jewish realm where they clung onto the horns of the altar. In other words, it was a sacred place where someone could beg for mercy. And even then, Muhammad would not give that man mercy. He had him murdered, killed, executed. All right? So, again, why? Because he mocked Muhammad. Who ordered it? Muhammad. And as I have discussed in other shows, showing from the history of Islam at that time, there were many people that Muhammad condemned to death for this exact thing. And so when the perpetrators of the slaughter at the magazine Charlie Hebdo went in, they said that they were avenging Muhammad. And they were following the example of Muhammad. And they were following Sharia law. In other words, what they were doing is inherent to Islam itself and is rooted in the so-called prophet Muhammad. I'll close with one other thought before we go. Please let's stop calling him the prophet Muhammad. He was not a prophet. He was a false prophet, if anything. All right? He was not a prophet. And we should not give even the honor of that title to somebody whose mission was to crush Christianity, to deny, legally deny, by force deny the public worship of the true God in the public proclamation of the true good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ. We should not honor that man as somebody who we would call the prophet. We should look at him like we look at someone like Karl Marx or Vladimir Lenin or Joseph Stalin, who was committed to extinguishing Christianity. That's what we're dealing with. And the people who want to understand, why are they killing people for a cartoon, for insulting, for a little political free speech? Because that's what Muhammad did. Evidently, Muhammad had really thin skin. And evidently, so do his most devout followers.
You have two choices. I mean, you can try to raise your children by design, or you will raise them by default. There are no perfect parents. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. If we have a plan, we've got a better chance of getting it right in the long run.
There is something deep within the heart of every human being that longs for parental acceptance and approval. When does a boy become a man?
Get a group of guys around and ask them that question.
I don't think there's a certain age. Some men stay boys their whole life.
I would say, 16, 18 years old.
Wow, that's a good question.
When they get bar mitzvah.
Well, I think when he has a child. So I just became at 56, 56 years old.
Without the power of the Holy Spirit changing us and giving us power over our sin, we can't hope to be the dads that our kids need us to be.
Heil, right in the Führer's face. When I was a boy in junior high school, one of our teachers brought some of the cartoons and some of the songs that were played on the radio that mocked Hitler and mocked the Nazis and mocked Germany at a time of war. Now, I said that because I recognize that there are people watching this who justly, at least culturally justly, feel conflicted. On one hand, we recognize that the First Amendment is central to American liberty and to freedom of the West, freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom to publicly cast doubt, to say things, right? That's central to freedom. On the other hand, we believe in the freedom of religion, and we don't generally want to mock other people's religions. We want to be courteous, right? So at one level, some of us have a little bit of a sense of conflict, and we might say, well, if it really bugs them that much to put a cartoon up of Muhammad, then just don't do it. Use prudence. Wouldn't be wise, wouldn't be prudent. So let's wisdom is the better part of valor. So we begin to make up excuses why. Well, then let's just not run it. I mean, New York Times won't run the ads or the cartoons. CNN won't run them. Fox News won't run them. The Washington Post, thank goodness, had the courage and integrity, as a one-off to run them, or at least run one, and I think the Weekly Standard has. So there is a conflict inside of the media itself based upon a love of freedom, in part, and fear. And, don't stir them up, don't agitate them. And so many of us are sitting here thinking, all right, I get it, and I don't know what to do. Let me explain to you how, when, and why the scales tip, okay? When the American Constitution was finally ratified with the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment included the right of freedom of the press, freedom of association, freedom of religion, all right? Political satire was a key part of the founding of America. Mocking. Now, some people are saying, well, a cartoon is not the same as a song. In the last segment, I quoted to you the passage from Ibn Kathir where Muhammad had people killed because of songs they were singing about him. And cartoons are not songs. No, the issue is this. It's mocking. It's insulting. As the king of Jordan said, insulting the Prophet Muhammad is a crime that cannot be justified under the pretext of freedom of expression. All right? I'm quoting him. So it's whether it's a verse, a song, a poem, a cartoon, at the end of the day, there wasn't a lot of printing of the press back then in Muhammad's day. There wasn't a printing press. You had vellum, you had parchment. So what they would do to tell stories and to make political points was they would create poetry and they would sing songs. So it's the package, all right? It's the issue of expressing contempt or disbelief toward Muhammad that is the criminal act for which Muhammad condemned people to death. So, bring it all the way around, this conflict between our love of the First Amendment and our understanding that it is central to American liberty, central, and wanting to be polite. Well, I'll say it again. Hi-oh, right in the Führer's face. They didn't make songs like that and put them on the air in 1932 and 1933 and 1934. They actually had the Olympics in Berlin while Hitler was the chancellor, okay? There was polite rapprochement, as they call it, polite dialogue between Chamberlain and the leaders of England and the leaders of France with the German chancellor, Adolf Hitler, Time magazine Man of the Year. But once we were at war, all bets were off. And what people in the West have to understand, contrary to John Kerry's foolish, untrue words, that this is not a clash of civilizations, that this is not a war of civilizations, it is. We are at war. We are at war because Muhammad declared war on us, because his original caliphs declared war on us, and because Islam has spread by the sword throughout the Middle East, throughout North Africa, throughout portions of Asia. Islam made it all the way into the Iberian Peninsula, as far as Tours, France, the Battle of Tours, where they were repelled, and then they held Spain and they held Greece, murdering people, slaughtering priests and women and nuns, and it was unthinkable brutality. They have declared war on us since their inception. They are still at war with us, as their so-called terrorists, their devout Muslim men, are showing. And now is the time to use the First Amendment, to embrace it, to cherish it, and to use it to show we do not believe in you, and we do hold your lies in contempt. We know that we're at war with you because your leader, Muhammad, declared war on us. Hello, friend. This is our new television studio, music studio, and documentary studio. Almost done. We're so close. It's been months and months of labor. Volunteer labor, labor done really inexpensively, people pitching in, bringing lumber that we cut literally from another state. We are excited to use this place for God's kingdom, for truth, for justice, for the fight for innocent lives. And if you believe in this show, it takes something like this to do it. We actually have to have a facility. We have to have the right tools, the right weapons to wage philosophical and theological and cultural and political war. So if you're blessed by this show, I'm asking you to go to our website right now and make as large a contribution as you can so we can buy the equipment that we need to finish this project. Thank you. I, like many of you, had significant influences on me when I was a boy, a young man, in my formative years. And I distinctly remember two teachers that I had. God rest their souls. I know one of them has left this life. I'm not sure about the other one. Mr. Vinoy and Mr. Halligan. Both of them said something when I was a young man that I remembered, I retained, and it made me feel like something big was going on. And what they said was, I may not agree with what you are saying, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. As we debate internally in America the showing of the cartoons, I want you to understand that there are so many dynamics at stake. For example, maybe there are companies that are thinking, look, when the cartoon crisis happened with the Danish a few years back, there were buildings that were burned to the ground, okay? There were people whose lives were at risk because of these cartoons, and we just don't want to do that, all right? We don't want lawyers, we don't want lawsuits, we don't want wrongful death lawsuits, we don't want people saying, why did you do this when you knew it might put us at risk? So there could be that. It could be fear masquerading as wisdom. I really believe that the phrase, wisdom is the better part of valor, was probably penned by a coward. Somebody who wanted to justify their flight from battle and their flight from duty in the framework of prudence and wisdom. It has just a very Machiavellian ring to me. But that aside, it may be a desire to be polite. It may be just flat out fear. Hey, I saw what happened to these people who did this. They had to go into hiding, and I don't want to live in hiding, and so I'm not going to do it. Whatever it is, we are going to have to continue this debate and continue this dialogue internally, all right? But what we have to grasp, and what is slowly happening, is that these attacks are inherent to Islam, all right? You can't get more inherent to, say, fasting and prayer than our Lord Jesus, okay? You can't get more inherent to 40 days in the wilderness where he fasted and he prayed and he was tempted by the devil. It's inherent to Christianity to fast and pray because it starts with the life of Jesus himself. You can't get more inherent to Islam than something that Muhammad himself did and said, all right? It's inherent to the religion. Muhammad ordered people to be killed, murdered, executed. A woman killed in her bed for writing poems against Muhammad. It's inherent to the religion. And this is why it's so critical for us to read Islamic sources, to read Islamic history, and to understand what is going on in their minds. It's not our narrative that matters so much at this point. It's their narrative. It's their story. And if we want to get in their head, we've got to understand what they think. And if we want to understand what they think, we have to say, they're studying Muhammad. Well, what did Muhammad say? What would Muhammad do? That's their narrative. If you like what you're watching, please watch this following commercial and stand with us if you're able. Hello, friend. This is our new television studio, music studio, and documentary studio. Almost done. We're so close. It's been months and months of labor. Volunteer labor, labor done really inexpensively, people pitching in, bringing lumber that we cut literally from another state. We are excited to use this place for God's kingdom, for truth, for justice, for the fight for innocent lives. And if you believe in this show, it takes something like this to do it. We actually have to have a facility. We have to have the right tools, the right weapons to wage philosophical and theological and cultural and political war. So if you're blessed by this show, I'm asking you to go to our website right now and make as large a contribution as you can so we can buy the equipment that we need to finish this project. Thank you. I have no fear of the future. Let us go forward into its mysteries. Let us tear aside the veils which hide it from our eyes, and let us move onward with confidence and courage. Sir Winston Churchill. Isn't it funny, or ironic, or just flat out hypocritical, that Obama, our president, really chided Sony for caving in to a nuclear-armed dictator in North Korea when they originally pulled the movie The Interview for fear. All right, just flat out fear. They pulled it, and then Obama said, no, you moved too quickly, you should air it. All right, so he's all about the First Amendment at that point, but then he derides us, as he did on the floor of the United Nations, those of us who want to say that Muhammad is a false prophet, was a false prophet, and that we should go ahead and publish cartoons or songs or pose or anything we want. There's a crazy amount of hypocrisy there. Another thing I want to point out to you, a Marxist terrorist wants to live. Think about it. If you're fighting communism, or Nazism for that matter, at the end of the day, once the Third Reich was defeated, there were German POWs living in Nebraska in a POW camp, and they let them live in America. I mean, there were Germans who emigrated here, all right? They wanted to live. A communist terrorist wants to live, but a Muslim terrorist, they have an incentive to die because they're thinking about the next life. The communist doesn't even believe in the next life, so he's frantic to keep this one going as long as he can. The Muslim, he's prepared to die because he thinks he has paradise waiting for him. Let me say one other thing in closing. I listen to a lot of media, watch media, and I thank God for people like Rush Limbaugh. Rush is, in my opinion, the greatest broadcaster, certainly of my lifetime. And then we've got others like Mark Levin, Michael Savage, Sean Hannity, and others. Great radio shows that are truly doing the best that they can with the light that they have. And there's Fox News, there's other television outlets. Some are doing more than others for the cause of freedom, standing against Islam. This show is unique. You know, there's things that every one of these broadcasters say that I simply don't agree with. And there are things that they should be saying that they're not. What sets this program apart is that we're theocentric. We're Christ-centered, without apology, without embarrassment. So if you like this show, I am asking you to help us get to the next level. Go to the website you see on the screen, or use the address that you see on the screen, and send us a gift to help us build our studio. We're going to be doing some TV. We're going to be doing documentaries. And there's some equipment needs that we have right now, that we need right now. And I'm asking, if you believe in what we're saying and doing, Please help us. God bless you.